Welcome to Pixel Focus, the podcast where we explore the positive connection between ADHD and video games, how they impact our lives, as well as how we play them. We're going to dive into the personal experiences with gaming and ADHD, as well as what the research is uncovering about their relationship. Joining me today is Dr. Stephen Taketa. He's a clinical psychologist for the students at University of Hawai'i West Oahu campus, and has been helping students navigate through their mental health trials of academics and studies for over 10 years now. We'll be talking about Dr. Taketa's opinions regarding the relationship between the two subjects, taking into account his personal experience over the year and what insight he might have on the possible positives between the two. Dr. Taketa, thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a bit about your background experience with the school, with your process as a psychologist, as well as any experience you might have with individuals with ADHD?
Okay, so I've been in the field of mental health for over 20 years. So before I was a psychologist, I was working at a care home for the mentally ill. And then I got my doctorate degree in 2009. And then I started working here at UH West Oahu in 2013. And I've been working here ever since. So ADHD is a very common diagnosis. I've many of my clients, probably several hundred, if not over 1,000 patients that I've interacted with had ADHD. I do psychological testing, so I'm able to test and diagnose ADHD from the tests that we give. And yeah, I work with a broad range of diagnoses and psychological challenges with people.
Would you say that a lot of students at the West Oahu campus, when they seek you out for therapy or sessions, of course, do they admit to ADHD having an impact on any of their academic functions or their studies and stuff like that?
Yes, a lot of people will report having ADHD. Now, I think that it's really hard because ADHD, to really be able to provide an accurate diagnosis requires pretty intensive assessment, right? And so I think that we have a portion of students who have been formally assessed and diagnosed with ADHD, but we also have a big range of students who are kind of self-diagnosed or believe that they have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for listeners who may not be entirely familiar, may not have a good scope or idea of what ADHD, how would you explain ADHD to them in like everyday terms or layman terms?
Well, ADHD, in my understanding, is typically a primary result of neurological variations in which impulse control becomes a challenging, right? And so neurologically, there's discrepancies between the way that the brain manages or controls impulses. I think that a lot of people don't realize, but the brain, the way that we're able to operate neurologically is based on our ability to resist impulses, right? So it's almost like there's an arrow in our brain that's just cocked and ready to go, and it takes energy not to fire the arrow, right? It actually takes less energy to fire the arrow. So when you think about symptoms of ADHD, they're required to have an onset during the early developmental period. And so you're typically going to see signs of ADHD early on when it has to do with impulse control, or sustained attention requires a lot of impulse control to kind of stay focused on one topic and screen out everything else. That requires impulse control. And sometimes people, so you have primary impulsive type, or you have the primary inattentive type. But did I answer your question about what ADHD is?
Yes, that was very quite informative on it. More on the primary intensive. Would you go into more detail on those two types for me?
Well, primarily inattentive would be that, the person may be appearing like they're paying attention, or they're doing something productive,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not necessarily attending to the most salient or the most important information at the time. So, for example, a student with the primary inattentive type in a class environment might be present in class, but because they're not attending to the information that's being presented in class, they're not able to recall it or use that information because it's not getting into the brain. So when we think about how the brain works, there is input, storage, and retrieval, right? So the primary inattentive type means that the information or the salient information is not getting into the brain to be stored, processed, or utilized, right? So that's where the disruption would be with the primary inattentive type.
Shifting focus into the relationship, and I'm not sure if you have a lot of experience talking about these two, but I was hoping you could shed some light with maybe your opinions on it. In your opinion, how do video games or any sort of electronic game, whether it's mobile games or even PC games and stuff like that, how do they affect that attention span or the focus of an individual with ADHD? There's a lot of studies about stuff like flow state, or how when individuals with ADHD interact with video games, they become in a state of hyperfocus. Do you have any opinions on that?
Sure. I think that when we think about the benefit of ADHD and playing video games, I guess depends on what kind of ADHD the person has. We also have to kind of think about what do we mean by benefit, right? So one of the I think the shortcomings is that does it generalize to other things? Because video games, so somebody with ADHD, you think about it as a learning variation. People with ADHD are actually quite gifted in many things, right? So like when it comes to, for example, for somebody with a primary impulse control type, so basically they're engaging in impulsive behavior. When you're having to do a task that they have mastered and they're having to produce really quick and make really quick decisions in that moment, they can be quite gifted at doing those tasks, right? So the thing about it is that all people, whether you have ADHD or not, are always going to do better cognitively, neurologically on tasks that they find pleasurable, right? So, and to some extent, playing video games can help, like just like working out, can help to improve attention and sustained concentration, right? They're very immersive, and so they really pull you in. But I think then the question becomes is how then does that generalize into areas that are necessarily undesirable? Because even if you're able to improve your performance on desirable tasks, how then do you translate that into undesirable tasks? So I think that there's no way around it, that if you're going to generalize it to an undesirable task, that you're going to have to do a little bit more work on the undesirable task for you to be able to generalize the benefits that you get from exercising in the way of playing video games.
There's plenty of studies that go into this, and ADHD, the study of ADHD, as well as the advancement of technology. Both of these things are steadily improving. When you do a lot of research into the studies of ADHD over the past decades, because ADHD has been diagnosed for many many decades now, a lot of them don't have sufficient information, or they need more time to research it. And of course, video games are also in an area where they continue to progress and become more advanced, VR and stuff like that. Are there particular games in mind, do you think, that tailor to or benefit individuals with ADHD more than other video games, like maybe a certain genre, or even what I just talked about with VR and stuff like that? Does that have any effect on individuals with ADHD?
Well, I think that, the video games are great because they're self-directed, right? So the I can choose what video game I want. I can play as long or as little as I want, right? You have control over it, which is good, right? And I think the addition of the VR is really exciting because you have the opportunity to kind of take something that is self-directed, but then implement kind of a generalizable piece to it, right? So basically, you could help kind of do a nice transfer between what the person feels is desirable and exciting to kind of being able to kind of nudge it over to things that are maybe less desirable. I think a virtual reality gives that opportunity for practice. But I think that it really depends on the person, because I think just like exercising, what kind of exercise is best for you to do? Well, the kind of exercise that you will do more often, right? So it depends on what the person finds to be most desirable, and if they're going to that is most likely to um to encourage, I think, the kind of practice that somebody would need to have to make improvements neurologically and cognitively.
Speaking of and I do want to ask, are you familiar with the project Endeavor RX? It's a mobile game project basically that developers on that team tailored to individuals with ADHD. I wanted to know if you had any opinions on maybe using video games such as the project for Endeavor RX as therapeutic tools for ADHD game projects.
I'm not familiar with Endeavor RX, although I think that would be pretty exciting, because I think that, just because a task is undesirable, it doesn't mean that you can't make it more desirable if you're creative, right? And I would imagine that if they're really targeting people with ADHD, that they would be mindful to try to make tasks that are undesirable desirable, which I think can be very helpful.
This is, of course, talking about like the misuse or other things that parents may be concerned about, because obviously talking about the benefits of the correlation between the two won't exactly highlight everything that we need to know, and there does need to be some stipulation as to where there may lie dangers in the relationship between the two. And video games has had a history of overuse and addiction. There's new diagnoses in over the past few decades, such as gaming disorder, of course, gaming addiction, a case. In your opinion, where do you see the possible line between beneficial play and harmful overuse?
That's a good question. I think that it really depends on the person, right? So I think that as a psychologist, I'm biased in that, we're kind of trained to help people to live adaptive lives, meaning that we help people to perform successfully in social and occupational settings, right? So that's kind of the criteria that I'm using to determine, is it overuse or underuse? And that's how we diagnose mental illness, right? So basically, you would have a gaming disorder if your playing of the video game compromised your ability to function in social and occupational settings. You're not able to kind of make and sustain healthy friendships. You're not able to kind of achieve our employment success, right? And so when you think about, why would somebody do something as undesirable as going to college, right? College sucks oftentimes, right? It's
Yeah.
not as always fun. Or why would somebody do something as undesirable as getting up every day to work and having a boss, breathing down your throat? Those are undesirable things. The reason that people do that is because they develop an underlying sense of competency, feeling that I am competent and able and valuable and worth having healthy relationships. I believe in myself to the extent that if I work hard, I'm going to get to a place that's beneficial for me, right? I think because of the immediate reward of gaming, it does have the addictive potential, like alcohol or anything else that gives you an instant kind of gratification. So I think that if gaming is used as a supplement or substitute for developing underlying competencies, then I think that it leads to misuse. However, if gaming is used as an addendum to you developing your underlying competencies, I think that it can be of great benefit.
Of course, for parents that are approaching this topic, in case any interest comes up for parents that wish to view this podcast or maybe listen in on this, hoping that they can get some sort of mind as to how they approach the topic. Say they're scared their child might be addicted to video games and they know their child is diagnosed with ADHD. How do you believe that parents can approach this topic? Do you have any advice to them in the creative, healthy balance?
Yeah, I think that I have maybe some guidance. I think that because people are so different, like a parent, you'll have four kids, they'll all come out totally different. And you'll know that with one kid, you have to take this approach with another kid, right? So we have to under account for kind of personality differences when you're parenting. But I think in general, we want to make sure that our children develop in a very balanced way, because to navigate the complexities of life, every parent's wish, a good parent's wish, like is that your children will live beyond you, that when you're not around, or if you're disabled, that you're going to have your kid, they're going to be okay, right? In order for a person or human being to be okay, they have to have a balanced set of skills. They have to have social skills, right? They have to have competency, they got to have drive, they have to have resilience and grit, right? So I think that one caution I would have is that children need to develop their own interest, and gaming is a wonderful thing for a lot of people. I mean, it can be very, very positive. It's a very healthy way of coping, so much better than other things like drugs and alcohol that they could use. I mean, there's a lot of really wonderful benefits to gaming that are transferable to life. That you can actually connect with people socially, right? So there are wonderful opportunities with gaming that I think that parents should be mindful not to just kind of assume that gaming is all bad, you know? And then also, I think some parents are concerned about violent games, right? And the truth is that a lot of people play violent games and are not violent, right? So, but I think that it requires you to kind of know your child. Is your child playing this violent video game as an escape from reality? Do they understand that this is not reality, right? So kind of paying attention to your child's individual needs, not assuming that gaming is bad, but seeing if you can use gaming to help them to develop the other life skills to be balanced. So, for example, you might say that your child can game for this amount of time if you do these things, which is very real life practice, because you can buy a nice car if you work hard and get the money to be able to buy the car. So if you do all of these things, then your reward is that you can game, and the bonus is that gaming is actually can be very helpful. So not only are you rewarding them, but the reward can actually be positive and contribute to a healthier individual. So I would say to know your child, or know the person that you're parenting, and try to figure out a way that helps them. And I think that no gaming, in my experience, has not been very helpful, because kids will find a way to game. And so they might as well game in a way that's productive.
Right. Do you think that because you work for West Oahu's campus, and of course, West Oahu's field of studies has grown tremendously. The creative media uh, practices over there, they have expanded. There are different types of classes for video game development, writing in video game, things like that. Um, these different outlets that push kids towards their interests and things such as that, the ADHD can really help hyper focus on video games, but I feel like that also helps push their interest further into real life, like in their future endeavors and things like that. Do you think that video games have a great pathway to future endeavors, like future jobs, opportunities like that, and how ADHD might transition into that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of kids that game for hours and hours and hours and never want to go into creative media or become video game developers, right? But I think that geez, I mean, I think it's a different kind of person, right? That says, I really love video games, but I also want to make this my life and my career, and so that I'm going to develop, produce something valuable and productive and contribute to the video game community and advancement of this science that people are developing. I think they're two different kinds of people, and I think it's really cool if somebody has a passion that way and wants to turn their passion into a profession. I think that's really excellent. If they have the drive to do that, I think that would be that's really wonderful. And I think with ADHD, the thing that I would advocate, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or autism, is that I think that we have to move away, and I really, really move away from the idea that it's a disability, right? Kind of
Mhm.
move away from the idea that it makes anybody any more or less special than anybody else as well. I think we have to kind of look at it as a learning variation, right? So I think that in the video game production industry, I think that there's absolutely a place for people with the learning variation of ADHD that will make them very gifted at certain aspects of video game production. But I also think that there are people that do not have ADHD who have other gifts that could be very valuable to the video game production industry.
And was there any last advice towards anyone dealing personally, not just parents, because there are individuals that are, that still experience ADHD in adulthood. Was there any personal advice that you would give them when looking at this situation, thinking about the relationship between the two and whether to look at the positives or benefits? Do you think there are any sort of last advice you could give to them that might help push them towards using it as a therapeutic tool or as a benefit to themselves, or giving them even the confidence to pursue having that as a hobby or as a job or even anything in the future?
Sure. The first one, the first advice that I would give is think in terms of universal design. What I mean by that is that gaming can not only help people with ADHD, but it can help people without ADHD. So I think that good learning strategies can help people with ADHD, but it can help people without ADHD. So I think that the first thing to think about is universal design. That these things can benefit not just people with ADHD, but everybody. I think the second thing to think about is be very careful of the labeling effect. In my practice, I have had more people label themselves as certain way that's not necessarily based on a formal assessment or diagnosis. And I think that that can be very harmful because you begin to live and perceive yourself in the context of these labels. But the truth is that these labels in many ways are artificial. They're just labels that humans came up with to categorize people. And I would recommend that if you feel like you have ADHD, it's important to get formally assessed. So you would have to not just by your PCP saying fill out this questionnaire, but going through a formal psychological assessment to scientifically measure your neurological functioning, and then to kind of take that feedback. Because the truth is that I can have two people with ADHD and they're completely different, right? But the problem is that if you just label yourself as ADHD, you're not going to be able to identify what your significant strengths and weaknesses are when you compare yourself to other people your age. So I think that I would be very cautious about the labeling effect. And I would also kind of think about what are your goals? What is it that your heart wants to do in life? And then work your way backwards and develop the skills that you need to do to get there. I think sometimes it's really dangerous when people say, well, I'm good at this and I'm good at this, are not good at this right now. So therefore, I'm going to choose my heart or my goals or my ambitions based on who I think that I am. I think that you should let your heart lead you and then work your way backwards as the skills that you need to develop to get there.
Thank you so much for all of the info, all the advice you've given me. I must give you a huge thanks, Dr. Stephen Taketa, for sharing both your story and your perspective on this topic. Through this episode, I feel like there's a lot of focus on the takeaway. I feel like your experience and a lot of your advice towards not only just students and individuals like me who deal with ADHD, but also parents can really walk away and think of this from a positive perspective, which is really just the goal of this podcast. Was there anything last you wanted to say to anybody?
No, no, I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting podcast. I think there's a lot of positive things that can come from talking about these kinds of things.
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much for your time, all your patience, and of course, all your work in the field that you do. Um, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share it with someone you feel might benefit from it. There are going to be other interviews, of course, you can look forward to, linked into my social media and many other platforms. If this topic interests you or you feel you have your own story to share, feel free to email me at any of the links I provide or contact me on my socials about it. Once more, this has been Pixel Focus, as well as Dr. Stephen Taketa, where focus meets play. And thank you so much, and until next time. Thanks for watching the Pixel Focus podcast. If you enjoyed that episode, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. Be sure to check out our socials and other podcast episodes.